Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. Time for yet another show, and we are ready to go. Bill in Portland, Maine has picked up on our theme in this morning's post. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, welcomes you to Tuesday, or as he, or well, me, I guess, likes to call it, the Mike Pence of weekdays. There's really not much to say about Tuesdays. It's not as bad as Monday. It's not as good as Friday. It isn't Hump Day, Wednesday. I don't usually use the term, but it's been popularized in the television commercial, or repopularized, I guess I should say. Can't blame it all on them. Thursday, I don't know. There's really not that much that's special about that, except for the fact that it's almost Friday. A lot of people treat Thursday happy hours the same way as they might a Friday, and who can blame them? But Tuesday, there's not much about it. It's bland, but somewhat offensive nonetheless. It's still early in the week, and I don't know. I feel bad for Tuesday, or two, for whom it was named. I think we actually dug that up one of these days in the past when we were learning about the names for the days in the week, but there's nothing to it. It's just annoying, and nobody wants anything to do with it. So here we are on the Mike Pence of weekdays with plenty to round up. Where do you want to start? The president is mentally ill? Is that where we begin? He is. I mean, he has been for a long time. Yesterday, he demonstrated the fact, once again, by continuing his now 3-day attack on Elijah Cummings in Baltimore, because people rightly, and this was the intention, took offense at what he was saying over the weekend, and so, that's what Trump does. He doubles down on things. I don't know. I think we should actually continue to... There's a part of me that says continue to fan the flames and see if he doubles down on the doubling down. It just, I don't know. It just hurts people. It hurts people in Baltimore. It hurts people all over the country. It upsets everyone, and those who are committed to voting for him aren't going to change their mind because racism was expressed. It's the reason they're there. So I don't know. And, who knows? I mean, what's the point even of trying to drive him at this point? There's very little reason to even continue with the theme, except just to let you know what he's up to day to day, hour to hour. He also spent part of the day yesterday, of course, telling people in ambiguous terms about his 9/11 experience. I guess the story yesterday was they finally had a bill signing ceremony for the 9/11 First Responders Fund that was finally renewed. This was, of course, the thing that Jon Stewart spent so much of his time on, and that Republican senators spent so much time blocking from being considered on the House floor ever, or by unanimous consent. There are various ways that Democrats tried to get this thing to the floor. It was an overwhelmingly popular bill, and with good reason. Of course, first responders to the World Trade Center following the September 11th attacks were suffering any number of horrible maladies due to the conditions that they worked in. And, of course, as a country, we had done virtually nothing to try and help with the expense and difficulty of the illnesses associated with their heroic work. And it was an embarrassment to the country and a stain on our honor, such that we have, if there's any of that left. And it was, rightly a major political issue. Republicans, for various reasons, kept blocking the completion of the work on this bill until they were good and ready to jump out of the way, I suppose. So they finally completed work And President Trump signed the bill, and he did the whole Rose Garden ceremony thing. And I guess for starters, he invited none of the Democrats whose work was instrumental on getting the bill written and passed. He, in fact, invited no Democrats at all. He made it an exclusively Republican event, even though it was Republicans who did all the work of trying to obstruct and delay the bill. And so he presented this entire false picture of who was behind the bill, though I guess I don't know what the option was for the press besides not going and not covering things. And I mean, that's been recommended to them. They simply appear to have rejected that as an approach to dealing with this presidency. And I'm not certain that I don't know how well it would work anyway. But they went ahead and covered it as though a legitimate president was acting in his legitimate capacity, presenting this thing as the work of Republicans. And, of course, he went even further. A lot of, the comments captured all over the news, and I guess we could play the clip, but I think you've all seen it by now. The key phrase being pulled out by most people sharing the clip, of course, this intimation that he had something serious and substantive to do with the rescue operations and the cleanup post 9/11 down at Ground Zero. His defenders, to the extent that there are any who want to defend this mentally defective president, say, well, he begins by saying he's not. He said he wasn't a first responder, and he wasn't, and with good reason he says he wasn't a first responder. He was not one. But the clip that's being played and passed around, I'm not going to consider myself a first responder, but I was down there. That's the problem. Of course, he was not down there. I mean, I'm sure he has visited Ground Zero since, and I don't know how recently after the 9/11 attacks he actually visited, and he may never have until it was a visitor's center essentially and a memorial park. But I was down there. But he goes on, and he's done this a number of times. He goes on at some length about how he visited and the devastation, and I saw how hard those heroic people were working, and he wasn't. He wasn't there. There's no video or pictorial record of it, but in addition to all of that, there's the eyewitness testimony of many people who were documented as having been there, and many people who were not documented. That is to say, famous people who were documented as being down there have said, I think we all would have recognized Donald Trump pretty quickly, and he was nowhere to be seen. Not famous people who just happened to be there also said, I was there and I wasn't looking for Donald Trump, but it's offensive for him to hint that he was there among the chaos when, there's a very, I don't know exactly how to put it. I wouldn't say that they necessarily would express there being some sort of special bond among people who had been there, but I suppose they probably do feel that. And people who were present that day, no doubt, are mostly angered by his claims. And those of us who weren't are no more comfortable with it. I mean, I guess I would say, as I did this morning, so I'm pretty sure I would say it. I'm fairly certain I'm going to just go ahead and say I would say this because I did say it. Imagine today going on the day with business as usual, the day after an American president out in the Rose Garden hinted that he had been, more or less first on the scene. He'd been present in the initial aftermath of Pearl Harbor. Yes, I drove down to Hawaii. Sure. Whatever. And I surveyed the wreckage, and I saw the heroes, responding and helping the wounded and cleaning up afterwards. I mean, it's just not something you should be able to get away with. And as a matter of fact, I mean, we actually went out of our way at some point to create a set of laws to make it actually illegal to make claims of stolen valor. And this doesn't necessarily actually comply with it, which is why he'll skirt the lines and get away with it. But I'm thinking about the number of people who spent the 2016 election saying stupid things such as, he tells it like it is. What are you talking about? He just told it precisely as it wasn't. And we all will take pictures, and for sure we'll put out on Twitter and in our newspapers that he says without any evidence that and there remains no documentary evidence that he was there and no one saw him, and or that everyone in fact knows what he was doing. It's more than not knowing where he was that day, and maybe he could have been down there without us noticing. He was on television. He was calling into television shows, pretending to be upset about the situation, but sneaking in, of course, famously, the mention that he now owned the tallest buildings in Lower Manhattan, which is I think has been disputed, that it turns out that they aren't the next tallest, but it wouldn't matter anyway. And even if they were, I mean, you can't really credit him for very much using that opportunity to call in and remind everybody of that. And in addition to all of that, of course, he is credibly accused, because he did it, of essentially stealing September 11th disaster relief funding that had been provided by the federal government, and I guess probably some by the state as well, claiming that he had incurred expenses as a result of the attack and the damage that was done to Lower Manhattan. And I think the germ of truth that he used was that there was some storage capacity in his downtown buildings that had been used to store either some emergency equipment or some things recovered perhaps from Ground Zero, and that had cost him money, and that there had been some damage to his buildings even though there was not. And he claimed a good $150,000 in relief funds. This supposed billionaire needed to have a slice of that pie, and I guess there's probably some chance that in the back of his mind, and ordinarily I wouldn't put this, I wouldn't hint that a president was involved in such a thing, but we are talking about Donald Trump. There's some possibility that he may be angling to see if he can get a slice of the funds in the program that he signed into legislation yesterday. Well, it's for covering the health claims of 9/11 first responders. I'm not going to say I'm a first responder, but I was there. I have a nagging cough, and maybe $6 or $7 million of that, $6 or $7 million of that money belongs to me. And who's gonna say no? I'm the president of the United States, and I'll falsify the records if need be in order to make sure that I'm entitled to it. All right. There's an awful lot about that. Let's see. What have you sent me here? Culture of Truth. Bobblespeak has sent me something with the hashtags, not only of KITM, of course, but Trump is lying about September 11th, which is an awfully damaging thing to say. What have we got here? Trump is still lying about the murder of 3,000 people on September 11th. What kind of person would do that? That is a good question. But I don't understand the photo that's being included in it, so maybe you can tell me a little bit more about it. I guess it's just it's a link to his tweet which reads this way: Trump is still lying about the murder of 3,000 people on September 11th. What kind of person would do that? That is a good question all by itself. This was tweeted, though, in late May 30th, 30 May, as you might say, if you were writing it down in an English newspaper for some reason. Why is it expressed this way? 30 May 2017. So it's been going on for quite a long time. Mike Musson saying, before being a 9/11 first responder, Forrest Trump was there for Neil Armstrong's first step onto the moon. Yes, people had a great time with that yesterday, and running a hashtag making fun of Donald Trump's recollection of history and all the various other historic moments that he also was at, which he wasn't at. It's been very interesting, a very interesting morning. By the way, speaking of stolen valor, a little bit closer to the mark on this one. John Ratcliffe, allegedly, and we have to keep saying it this way, allegedly President Trump's choice for Director of National Intelligence. I don't know whether anybody has actually seen the paperwork on this stuff yet, but as I always remind you, you're going to have to make sure that this is done right. With the Congress out on recess, rather than dealing with the very necessary impeachment and wishful thinking here, removal of Donald Trump from office, they are, of course, on their August recess. But with them not on hand to receive or process the nomination of Ratcliffe, it won't make very much difference. That gives them a cushion to change their mind. It wouldn't be far from the first cabinet nomination that ended up being withdrawn before it was even officially submitted. But, of course, everybody gets to watch him go ahead and pretend to have responded quickly to the vacancy he created and nominate Ratcliffe, and everyone will treat it as though he were nominated when, in fact, the paperwork likely hasn't been submitted at any point. It's just kind of crazy. Oh, let's see. Bob will speak also pointing out that he, too, saying, oh, my God, I just realized he's going to apply to the 9/11 compensation fund, as he was tweeting yesterday. I've got one out there, too, just so you're aware of it. But, yeah, I have thought that might be the case. I said it this morning, as you heard, and tweeted it yesterday because we basically watch the same guy do the same crazy stuff and think the same crazy things about him. So not surprising, and I bet we're two among many who came up with the same formulation. All right. Oh, look at this. Just for fun, this is a Daily News of New York front page. When was this from? A front page of the Daily News. You know how they love to do their tabloid headlines. Trump's 9/11 lie. Bragged about donating to victims' charities, but actually gave nothing. Only one of his very many lies. So I guess we can recirculate that one for all to see, just because it's so much fun to do so. All right. So anyway, we were on John Ratcliffe not being qualified for the job, et cetera, et cetera. I have an article put aside, but Kate Sherrill also sends me this one. Let's see if it's similar or maybe even the same article. We'll take a look at this. Representative Ratcliffe padding his resume. I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you, says Kate. She sends me the tweet of, all right, let's open it up here, Cheryl Lynn, and let's see, he goes by the handle of Shossy, Shossy, Shossy 2, so you tell me what that's about. Ratcliffe was a U.S. attorney in Texas for 1 year. He was also been on the oversight committee for 1 year as well. Not even, I guess. Or the Judiciary Committee. He was a U.S. attorney in Texas for 1 year from 2007 to 2008. There is no evidence that he ever prosecuted a terrorism case, so his one claim of national security fame looks like it's false. He's a liar and a con man, perfect for Trump's corrupt cabinet. And I guess it's linked to the MSNBC article, which I do think is the one that I've got in pocket here. Yes, it is. Let's go with that and call that one up and see if we can't read through it before the break. It is, of course, video heavy, and we ought to see about making sure all the volumes are turned down on computers not equipped to play clips on the air. If it becomes necessary to hear, yeah, I guess it does, because, MSNBC tends to send video clips around rather than links to their actual stories. Do they, is there a text story about this somewhere that I can read through? I mean, the basic Yeah, probably not. I'll have to look up another one and see if we can't find a print version of this. But the long story short here, let's see if we can get the name into the search engine here. But Ratcliffe, I guess, was U.S. Attorney in Texas, one among many, and his main claim to fame here, the reason for running for Congress was, I protected this country by prosecuting terrorism cases for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I guess he was an assistant U.S. Attorney, or was he U.S. Attorney for the entire district? That may actually have been the case. Who's got this one? Let's try. Here's one from ABC News that Trump's pick for intelligence director misrepresented role in anti-terror case. They were trying to find the germ of truth behind his claim to have been the lead prosecutor or a key prosecutor of terrorism cases. And I protected this country by putting terrorists in jail where they belong. And as it turns out, no, he didn't. And while he was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, there were no terrorism cases that he prosecuted, that he exaggerated his role in the one terrorism case that actually might have been prosecuted during his tenure. And essentially, his claim to have put a bunch of the bad guys in jail is false. And he rode that to Congress because down in Texas, there are certain districts where if you say you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if it's later found out that you were lying about prosecuting terrorism cases. You have an R after your name, and that's all we need to see. All right, here's the ABC News case story on it. Alexander Malin, I'm guessing with two L's, not Malin, but Alexander Malin, James Gordon Meek, and Mike Levine teaming up for this, posted, late last night / early this morning, depending on how you categorize 11:52 a.m. Eastern Time. Are you a purist and say early this morning? Are you, if you're still awake from the day before, does it count as late as night to you? Actually beside the point. Let's get right to it. President Donald Trump's pick for the next Director of National Intelligence, Representative John Ratcliffe, Republican of Texas, has misrepresented his role in an anti-terrorism case, one single case, that he's repeatedly cited among his credentials related to national security issues, because he doesn't have any other ones. He's leaning on whatever he's got. The apparent embellishment, again, this is a lie, but the apparent embellishment is related to two anti-terrorism financing trials in a case known as the U.S. versus Holy Land Foundation, the second of which resulted in convictions for several individuals found to have illegally funneled charity money to the U.S. designated terrorist group Hamas. Oh, the Friends of Hamas. Remember them? That's not actually connected, but okay. In a 2015 press release, Ratcliffe's House website stated, quote, "When serving by special appointment in U.S. v. Holy Land Foundation, he convicted individuals who were funneling money to Hamas behind the front of a charitable organization," unquote. His official campaign website, in a February 2016 post, also touted his, quote, "special appointment as the prosecutor in U.S. v. Holy Land Foundation, one of the nation's largest terrorism financing cases." But ABC News could find no public court records that connect Ratcliffe to either of the two trials for the case. Now, if you had been, by special appointment, made the lead prosecutor in this allegedly large anti-terrorism case, your name would appear on the record somewhere. ABC News crack investigative staff was able to find no connection to either one of the two trials in the case. Former officials directly involved in the decade-long Holy Land Foundation investigation could not recall Ratcliffe having any role. And 4 former defense attorneys who served on the cases told ABC News on Monday that they had no recollection of Ratcliffe being involved with any of the proceedings that resulted in the convictions of their clients. In a statement to ABC News, Ratcliffe's office clarified that his status regarding the case was instead related to investigating issues surrounding what led to the mistrial in the first case. We blew the first case against these guys. Does anyone know why? Well, Ratcliffe was assigned to finding out why, and we don't know whether he ever did. But they came back to trial later on, and I suppose remedied the situation and sent the defendants to jail. He just didn't have anything to do with that either. In a statement to ABC News, Ratcliffe's office clarified that his status regarding the case was instead related to investigating issues surrounding what led to the mistrial in the first case. Quote, because the investigation did not result in any charges, it would not be in accordance with Department of Justice policies to make further details public, Rachel Stevens, a spokesperson for Ratcliffe, said. However, Department of Justice records will confirm that as both Chief of Anti-Terrorism and National Security for the Eastern District of Texas from 2004 to 2008, Ratcliffe opened, managed, and supervised numerous, in fact, domestic and international terrorism-related cases. Well, we'll find out more about that, I guess, as time goes on. Stevens didn't identify any specific terrorism cases prosecuted by Ratcliffe, which will tell you something. It tells you that he didn't do any. And didn't comment on the discrepancy between the previous statement on Ratcliffe's website that he, quote, convicted individuals who were funneling money to Hamas. The clarification is that he did not. They just didn't want to say that. Anyway, the lead prosecutor was U.S. Attorney Jim Jacks. That's the person who was, in fact, U.S. Attorney at that point. Said Matthew Levitt, a former FBI analyst who served as the government's expert witness in both trials. I met with him every time, but I was only there at the trial for my testimony. I don't think I've ever met John Ratcliffe. I didn't even think of the trial when his name came up for DNI. It didn't even occur to me. So even when they saw the news that he was going to be famous, they couldn't recall him from anything. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Emirates Radio. Let's continue with this article from ABC News, since they actually printed a print article versus MSNBC, which gave me a video clip, which they would likely sue me if I tried to use. You know, it's not that I don't want to give MSNBC credit for it. It's that they'll sue me for trying. Anyway, who knows? Maybe they will never find out about it. But YouTube's algorithm will probably likely alert them if I were to include 2 minutes worth of their video in the program uninterrupted. Let's see. Where were we here? A spokesman for the Northern District of Texas's office referred requests to comment to Ratcliffe's office. Basically, they said, hey, man, he's the one who's lying here. Go call his office. And by the way, for Greg, who's probably not listening today because he's on vacation, but just for the record, I wanted to say, at some point you had asked me, because we were covering a story with the Southern District of New York in it for the 500th time, do any of these states have northern districts? Well, here it is. Northern District of Texas. They've got one. All right, so let's see. They said, we're not the one who's lying. We think you should ask Ratcliffe's office. So, of course, ABC News does what? They did call Ratcliffe's office, but they weren't getting a satisfactory answer out of that. So they also called the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice said, ask the White House. We're not the ones who nominated him as DNI. Go call the White House. Everyone wants to distance themselves from this idiot. But yeah, sure, he should be the Director of National Intelligence. Absolutely. A senior Democratic aide on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where Ratcliffe would face a confirmation hearing, Side note on that one, being well covered and well publicized by our own Joan McCarter all over Twitter and Daily Kos. Guess who's going to end up being what it looks like as the deciding vote on the Intelligence Committee's question of whether to forward his nomination with or without recommendation to the entirety of the Senate for confirmation? It looks like it will be the deeply concerned Susan Collins. We'll have that one in her hands, I guess in one of her last acts for the Trump administration before she is hopefully unceremoniously tossed out on her ear, we'll say, by the people of Maine. Anyway, senior Democratic aide on the Senate Intelligence Committee, another place we called to try and find somebody who would take responsibility for this idiot. They said it's safe to say we will be looking at his experience and record in intelligence-related issues. That's a non-answer, but it's the best they could do. Well, again, they were like, what are you looking at us for? Call Ratcliffe. He's supposed to answer these questions, but he's avoiding them. Prior to his time as U.S. Attorney, Ratcliffe was appointed by President George W. Bush as Chief of Anti-Terrorism and National Security in the Eastern District of Texas. Not the Northern District, but the Eastern District of Texas. Interesting. So, how does that even happen? So, before he's a U.S. Attorney, and was he in fact U.S. Attorney as opposed to Assistant U.S. Attorney? I'm still not clear on that. I would look up his record, but it's probably full of lies, so I'm not sure. How do you get the attention of President Bush to become Chief of Anti-Terrorism and National Security for the Eastern District of Texas? I don't know. Probably by being a donor and a lawyer. And that's all it takes. According to the U.S. Attorney who led the office at the time, Matthew Orwig, that would be the Eastern District of Texas, Ratcliffe worked on several cases involving domestic and international terrorism, but declined to name specific cases. People see trials and people see the high-profile stuff, and that's really just a tiny percentage of the great work that's done by law enforcement every day since 9/11, Orwig told ABC News. And that's true, and it's true even before 9/11, but I guess he felt like it was important to invoke that. When you think about it, for the last 15 years, he's very much been in the national security arena, first as anti-terrorism coordinator, then as U.S. Attorney, then as a congressman on the Judiciary Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and the Intelligence Committee. How did he get those three postings, by the way? Are you kidding me? That's just stupid. Anyway, I can't think of anyone who would have a better background that equips them for the position, Orwig added. But that actually sounds like Orwig backing him up so that when they finally chuck Ratcliffe overboard, they might consider Orwig for the job, quite honestly. I mean, you can't think of anybody who would have a better background for Director of National Intelligence than some guy who was... Now, here you might be able to get away with claiming he was a coffee boy, and it might work. Ratcliffe has also made questionable claims about his exact role in targeting undocumented immigrants, anything that'll make him popular with Republicans. But how interesting is it? This is a very unusual case. A virulent, Trumpist, racist Republican who claims to have been tough on terrorism and tough on immigrants, but who in fact wasn't. It's a very interesting phenomenon. In February 2014 an interview with radio station KETR, he said, quote, as U.S. Attorney, I arrested 300 illegals in a single day. Of course, he didn't do that. He may have been U.S. Attorney while it happened. He may not have been. It may never have happened, but he certainly didn't arrest anybody. 2 years later, Ratcliffe's campaign for Congress issued a press release repeating that claim, and according to the biography on his current congressional website as of Monday night, he, quote, arrested 300 illegal aliens in a single day. But in April 2008, when nearly 300 undocumented immigrants were arrested in raids tied to Texas poultry plants, these happened not only in Texas, but in Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas, and West Virginia. And at the time, Ratcliffe made clear that it was federal agents who made the arrests. In June of 2017, another Ratcliffe press release was more nuanced about his role in the raids as U.S. attorney, saying his work, quote, led to the arrests of more than 300 illegal aliens in a single day, unquote. So I guess he sort of cleaned that one up, but then went back to dirtying it up as soon as he needed to run for Congress with that as an accomplishment under his belt. Extraordinarily lazy, but par for the course for the Republican squad, which grows in numbers each day. These are the faces of the Republican Party, folks, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do to stop it, nothing you can do to clean it up. Wow, they're so much fun, these people. Okay, let me mark this one, and we'll park it and pocket for later retrieval so that we can close that tab and not worry about that for the time being. Moving on to a couple other stories. Oh, look at these. There's some good ones that are changing their pictures even as we speak here in Pocket. I didn't even know that was possible. All right, let's see. Oh, speaking of Ratcliffe, there was this piece in Time magazine. That still exists, by the way. And writer here is John Walcott. An attempt to autoplay some video, but we'll just skip over that. This one under the headline of Top GOP Senator. I keep forgetting to say GOP, as we like to do on the show. Top GOP Senator warned the White House about Trump's choice for National Intelligence Director. Apparently, somebody important in the Republican ranks of the Senate told Trump, either directly or through an intermediary, yeah, this guy actually sucks, and I'm not 100% certain we'll be able to confirm him after all. This would, again, not be the first time that they've changed course and dropped the nomination while it was still pending. Probably about the 6th or 7th such nomination, I would think. Trump's decision to name a staunch Republican ally with a limited background in spycraft to replace Dan Coats as the nation's top intelligence official has aroused concern on Capitol Hill. I'm deeply concerned, as Susan Collins would put it, including a warning to the White House from the Republican head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. But among veteran members of the nation's intelligence agencies, the mood is resignation. That is a funny way of putting it and possibly a double entendre. Yes, we're resigned to the fact that a totally inexperienced political hack will be put in charge of this, but we're used to that. But this one is particularly hacky. But also we might resign, I think is what that may mean in the background. Of course, they're talking to, when they say a warning from the Republican head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, we are talking about the traitor Richard Burr. And I feel comfortable saying he's a traitor for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, of course, he's descended from the traitor Aaron Burr. But he is himself a traitor, just as Mitch McConnell is, just as, of course, Donald Trump himself is. Maybe John Ratcliffe, certainly his designation, allegedly, as Director of National Intelligence is an act of treason, even if he's not a traitor himself. But Richard Burr, of course, involved in the treasonous activity of ferrying the classified information he was receiving in briefings from the counterintelligence community regarding its investigation into Donald Trump and his alleged collusion with the Russians in the 2016 elections. This was being conveyed to him, one, in confidence, and two, by virtue of his membership in the Gang of Eight, the so-called Gang of Eight, the bipartisan leadership of both houses of Congress and of the intelligence committees in each house. He's entitled by law to briefing from the counterintelligence agencies about what they were up to and what they were discovering, and he simply would turn around and go to the White House and tell them what were the results of the investigation as far as he knew, which wouldn't be a breach, I don't think, of the classification laws, since almost certainly the president would have been entitled to get that information directly. But the briefers were probably hedging their bets with what they were telling him for two reasons, not the least of which is they didn't want to compromise the counterintelligence investigation, and two, he wouldn't have sat still for it anyway. So I don't know. Maybe his only pipeline to it was Richard Burr. Anyway, in naming Texas Representative John Ratcliffe to be Director of National Intelligence, Trump ignored a warning from Republican Senator Richard Burr, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, according to congressional aides familiar with the matter. Burr told the White House last week that the move would inject more partisan politics into the work of the intelligence agencies, said the sources, who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to speak on the matter. The 2004 Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act, or IRTPA, stipulates that the DNI must have, quote, extensive national security experience, unquote. That, of course, like everything in a statute, open to interpretation. Ratcliffe was a prosecutor and politician in Texas and has served on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence for only 7 months. Coates and his predecessors in the job all had years of experience in the intelligence community, overseeing it and serving as U.S. ambassadors. Although even that is probably shaky foundation, quite honestly. Burr's office declined to comment on his communications with the White House regarding Ratcliffe. The White House did not immediately return request for comment. Coates has earned praise for standing up for the intelligence community even when its conclusions contradicted Trump. The former Republican senator from Indiana and longtime ally of Vice President Mike Pence, the Tuesday of politicians, kept politics out of the agency's work. Says the Senate Intelligence Committee's ranking Democrat, Mark Warner of Virginia, who has to work with Burr every day. The mission of the intelligence agencies is to speak truth to power, Warner said in a statement. All right. Not really. I say all right, but no. I think in the end, no, I disagree with that. But, okay. It's nice if they do. As DNI, Coates stayed true to that mission. Coates' relationship with Trump was shaky from the start and continued to fray as he publicly disagreed with him on policy. Coates defended the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in an effort to help Trump defeat Hillary Clinton, and publicly expressed surprise at the president's decision to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin last year in Finland, saying, "That is going to be special." Testifying before Congress in the early days of his tenure, Coates reiterated his subordinates' conclusion that Iran has continued to comply with the six-nation agreement restricting its nuclear program. Trump denounced and then abandoned the agreement. Despite Trump's optimism about striking a deal with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un to eliminate his country's nuclear weapons, Coates repeated the intelligence assessment that Pyongyang is unlikely ever to abandon weapons Kim considers essential to his regime's survival. Ratcliffe, on the other hand, and this is how he's going to get the job, or how he got nominated anyway, or how his name came up, which is really the best we can say with respect to the nomination. Ratcliffe, on the other hand, seemed to go out of his way to back the president up on matters where he and the intelligence community have differed. Ratcliffe suggested, while questioning former special counsel Robert Mueller last week, that Russia had interfered in the 2016 presidential election on behalf of Clinton, a notion that, most people regard as crazy, but a notion that contradicts the repeated public findings of the intelligence community. One intelligence official on Monday called Ratcliffe's assertion ridiculous on both faces of it. And I don't know whether that was meant to be double entendre or not, two-faced. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York said Ratcliffe was selected because he exhibited blind loyalty to President Trump when he grilled Mueller about his report. Yes, that is the reason. In a sign of how dysfunctional President Trump's relationship with the intelligence community has become already, some senior spies and analysts say having a political ally as DNI may not make much of a difference at this point. Trump, these senior officials point out, pays only sporadic attention to his daily briefings, routinely ignores analysis that contradicts his own views, and in many cases pursues policies that analysts have concluded are fruitless or misguided. He's in deep crap with the intelligence community as it is, and adding another sycophant, I guess, as they say here, not likely to make a great deal of difference in terms of Trump's decision-making. Where it does make a difference, of course, is in situations where Trump will need, or Trump functionaries will need to legalize their activities after the fact. I'm certain, I can't tell you off the top of my head that what the situations are, but as we find in most administrative law and constitutional law, there are places where activity that would be otherwise questionable, possibly illegal or unconstitutional, is remedied if you can get the permission of certain officials sitting in certain privileged perches by virtue of their having been nominated to those positions by a legitimately elected president and confirmed in those positions by a free and independent, I guess, and legitimately elected Senate of the United States. And we have problems at every stage of that process. But the assumption in law is that a duly elected president, dutifully following protocol and procedure in nominating a director of national intelligence and seeing that director of national intelligence ratified in the nomination by the Senate, would therefore be empowered to waive certain requirements or give his permission by virtue of his position to certain intelligence activities that might otherwise be suspect or illegal. So it's dangerous putting him in at DNI, and worse, perhaps later putting Devin Nunes in at the CIA, and of course appointing his own sycophants as judges in case any of this really goes haywire and makes it to court. He can rely on another layer of sycophants embedded in the government to whitewash and legalize his activities after the fact. That's, I think, the real danger here. From an operational standpoint, it sounds like the people in the intelligence community say it won't make much difference operationally in terms of how Trump makes his decisions. He's already doing that poorly and without regard to the intelligence being collected for his benefit. And again, just as a special reminder to everyone, since I guess the 9/11 thing is back in the news, that Trump has made it to 2019 without even realizing that there's a Q in the spelling of Al-Qaeda is especially revealing. Imagine never having seen enough written material on a major threat to the national security of the United States to realize that there was a Q in the spelling, even if you put it in the wrong place or followed it with a U because that's a spelling convention in English. You would have a Q in there somewhere. Or you could even go with the old abbreviation of AQ, as people sometimes do in these intelligence community documents. Anyway, veteran intelligence analysts, though, worry that Ratcliffe will further undermine national security decision-making if he is confirmed as DNI. The change from Coates to Ratcliffe is bad not only for the intelligence community, but for the cause of well-informed foreign policy, says former CIA officer Paul Pillar. It probably is true that Trump is not going to pay much attention to the intelligence community's judgment no matter who is DNI, and that he will continue to get his beliefs and material more from Fox than from any part of the federal bureaucracy, including the intelligence community. But a partisan warrior such as Ratcliffe can do additional damage by politicizing the part of the intelligence community product that is available to the public and to Congress. And that is a good point, too. What will be classified and what will be declassified in an effort to convince the public that conspiracy theorists like Donald Trump and John Ratcliffe are right. You're not going to be able to review the materials for yourself to find out whether or not it was politically motivated release or whether or not there was more relevant information which is still being withheld by the intelligence community, because the gatekeeper there is going to be a conspiracy theorist and Trump loyalist. That is problematic all by itself. I would add another layer of problem to that. It's hinted at right here in these comments. Trump tends to get more of his beliefs and material, as they say, from Fox News than from the federal bureaucracy. John Ratcliffe might, by virtue of his sycophancy, I don't know how you would put that and how you would pronounce the word, but by virtue of his devotion to Trumpism, he may be uniquely positioned to color, if not the view of the entire public, then certainly of Donald Trump, color his view of foreign policy situations, of national security situations, by being savvy in the Fox News funneling system. He, as a Republican politician, might be favorably inclined to tipping off Fox News or feeding to Fox News information that he wants before the president in order to back up and promote his conspiracy theories. And I don't know here whether we're talking about Ratcliffe's own conspiracy theories, Donald Trump's own conspiracy theories, the conspiracies in which they share an agreement. But again, another point at which another inflection point to use to realize the danger of putting someone like this in a position like this. They will be able to broadcast on what is still considered in some quarters a legitimate television network news presented by people in suits and everything to the United States, to citizens all across the United States, including the President of the United States, whatever they make up. I mean, whether it's fake intelligence, whether it's altered intelligence, whether it has no basis in intelligence research whatsoever, they'll be able to make sure that when the Fox producers are putting together their morning show, if they get a call from the Director of National Intelligence who says, as a matter of national security, you got to tell the president this, you got to let it be known that, that Kim Jong-un has uncovered intelligence from a Western intelligence source that proves that crooked Hillary Clinton is in fact a pedophile and stole all the money out of the Treasury and is storing it along with her child sex slaves in the basement of Comet Pizza. So says the Director of National Intelligence. That's got to be broadcast. We report, you decide, right? I mean, it will be extraordinarily dangerous. I think they're right. It remains unclear who will lead the intelligence community while Ratcliffe is considered by the Senate. Of course, we heard yesterday from legal authorities that it does not remain unclear. It is perfectly clear. It is a matter of law. All you need to do is read the statute, and that will tell you who is leading the intelligence community while Ratcliffe's nomination, if it has actually been made, is considered by the Senate. But what the hell? We're only Time magazine here. Let's just say it's unclear because either we didn't bother to find out that it's supposed to be clear, or we did find out that it was supposed to be clear, and our reaction to that was, we know for sure Donald Trump isn't going to follow this law. I just wish, I guess they must be aware of it, because I see that they're making mention of Sue Gordon, who by law would be acting DNI. So let's see how they put it. It remains unclear who will lead the intelligence community while Ratcliffe is considered by the Senate. Trump announced that he would name an acting DNI after Coates's August 15th departure. The 2004 law creating the position stipulates that the principal deputy DNI will take over temporarily when the office is vacant. That would grant interim authority to Sue Gordon, a longtime intelligence professional who is held in high regard by her subordinates and on Capitol Hill. It's not clear how long Gordon might stay on, however. Say James Clapper, or this is really supposed to say, says James Clapper, Coates's predecessor as DNI and an official in Gordon's office. I guess a second person who is currently an official in Gordon's office concurs. Burr's warning provides hope for some of his opponents that Ratcliffe may not ultimately get the job. The Senate Intelligence Committee, which is charged with recommending to the full Senate whether to approve DNI nominees, has been consistently bipartisan, says Clapper. No one should assume that the Senate will confirm Ratcliffe, he says. However, the Republican Party has been reticent to stand up to Trump, and it would be surprising to see the GOP buck him on a senior national security choice. It would be very unusual indeed. But apparently, not all of the commitments are in from all of the Republicans yet, and so it puts, as we said, Susan Collins in the very disturbing position of perhaps being the deciding vote. Not that that will make a difference either. You can, of course, report a nomination out of committee with no recommendation whatsoever, or even with a recommendation that the nomination be rejected, but then just put it on the Senate floor and accept it. So that has happened in the past, too. They can go ahead and do that. It's not absolutely critical. It's just the first round. I guess what people will eventually refer to as a test vote of some kind, even though there's no such thing. Okay. What else should we catch up with? Gosh, there's just so much. Let's see. What is, I don't even know what, I don't recognize the source here. Oh, okay, I see. Go.com, I was looking at in Pocket. It says it's the source here is from go.com, but it is in fact ABC News that uses abcnews.go.com, which I don't know what the hell that's supposed to be about, but it puts us back in the ABC News domain as we come to our top of the hour 1 minute break. Let's see. When we come back, we will begin down this rabbit hole. Trump aide submitted drafts of 2016 America First energy speech. Did you realize that there was a America First energy speech given during the 2000 campaign? Yes. And what did this Trump aide do by way of checking the draft of this America First energy speech? Well, he turned it over to the government of the United Arab Emirates to ask them whether they thought it was okay. Now, it's wise to consult with your major energy suppliers, I suppose, but in an America First speech, why would you want to check with anyone but Americans? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with collusion with foreign governments. When we return, we'll look. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Emirates Radio. You know, I think I've finally hit on the winning formula for dealing with the frogs in the throat in each morning. I've decided on a great breakfast regimen would be chocolate milkshakes and bananas. I think that will help clear up the old throat and the speech pattern. I don't know what's going on here. No matter what I try, it's just not something that I don't know. And I don't know. I don't take note of it for the rest of the day. Maybe I spend my whole day clearing my throat. All right. Well, that's not news. This is news, I guess. Benjamin Siegel and Matthew Mosk believe this is news on behalf of ABC News, for which they work. Bugsy Siegel. Does anybody ever call him that? Benjamin Siegel? All right. Well, I didn't even realize he was still around and working and had gone legit. The video is about something else, of course. We've had this page open for too long. We're not going to see video about Trump and the UAE anymore. It's time to see video of Katy Perry going to awards ceremonies. Not sure what that's supposed to mean here. Okay. Back to the headline. Trump aide submitted drafts of 2016 America First energy speech to UAE for edits. Emails show. Hopefully this one won't take too long to get through. Just thought it would make good background. Sounds like something that might come up once again in the near future. Let's see. When candidate Donald Trump prepared to give a major energy speech, a major speech. You know how he loved to say everything was going to be major. During the 2016 campaign, one of his closest advisors provided a pre-speech preview to senior UAE officials, an unorthodox move, to say the least. How unorthodox? So unorthodox that it caught the attention of federal investigators, according to emails and text messages uncovered by a House Oversight Committee investigation. You know who heads those up, Elijah Cummings. Perhaps word of this story breaking could have had a role in Trump's decision to spend the weekend attacking Elijah Cummings. Just to connect it to that story. The Trump administration has virtually obliterated the lines normally separating government policymaking from corporate and foreign interests, according to a report overseen by House Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings, a Maryland Democrat, who commissioned the investigation into back-channel business dealings between certain Trump aides and Middle Eastern countries. 2 weeks before Trump was scheduled to deliver the energy policy speech, Thomas Barrack, remember him? A California investment tycoon with extensive contacts in the Middle East and who later helped oversee Trump's inauguration and all the thievery that went on there, provided a former business associate inside the UAE with an advance copy of the candidate's planned remarks. The associate then told Barrack that he shared them with the UAE and Saudi government officials, after which Barrack arranged for language requested by UAE officials to be added to the speech with the help of Trump's campaign manager at the time, the now imprisoned Paul Manafort. So, once again, screwing around in the Middle East for money, these fools asked the United Arab Emirates to please help write Donald Trump's America First energy speech. America First, except for everybody else who comes before America, apparently. People who can pay me money first. People who can pay my friends money second, then maybe America, but probably not. This is most likely the final version of the speech. It has the language you want, Manafort confirmed in an email to Barrack on the day of the speech. According to the report, Manafort has since gone to prison, of course, for financial crimes unrelated to his campaign work. That is what they say here in ABC News, but in fact, the financial crimes are intimately related to his campaign work. He has no finances but for his campaign work. It's foolish and unnecessary, misleading, unnecessarily misleading, in fact, to tell people that his financial crimes are unrelated to his political campaign work. That's how he was able to commit them. Anyway, by the way, I never did check into the pronunciation. I assume that Tom Barrack goes with the much more anglicized Barrack pronunciation, though he too is of Middle Eastern descent, and it could easily be read Barack, very much like Barack Obama, who of course is a secret Muslim from Africa, and not at all like the possibly secret Muslim also from Africa, Tom Barrack. But apparently I think he's Lebanese. The claim is that he is Lebanese Christian, and there are plenty of them, and so it's entirely believable. I'm just saying there are plenty of Lebanese Muslims as well. And if you were looking to get along, to go along in the United States of America and in the Trump administration in particular, you too would go with Barrack and Christian rather than Barack and Muslim, even though Barack Obama is himself a Christian. Just sort of one of those fun games we like to play around here. All right, so where were we? We left off with Manafort letting Barrack know, we put the language that you wanted in. You wanted it because the United Arab Emirates wanted it, and here is our America First energy speech brought to you by the government of the UAE, which sells us all our energy. All right. The White House declined to comment because they were caught dead to rights, so they just ignored it. House investigators note in their report that none of the documents they gathered indicate whether, quote, whether Trump was aware that drafts of his speech were circulated to foreign officials in the Middle East or that feedback had been provided through Mr. Barrack and Mr. Manafort, unquote. That's entirely possible. He may not be aware that he's president of the United States at any given moment, but okay. Attorneys for Manafort declined to comment when reached on Monday. The back-channel exchange, they love the back channels, these guys, caught the attention not only of House investigators but also federal prosecutors, according to a report late Sunday in the New York Times, which first reported on the dealings. I don't think I even happened to notice that, but we were busy excoriating the New York Times for other things. ABC News has obtained copies of more detailed emails and texts from House investigators who gathered more than 60,000 documents showing what they say are the intermingling of private interests and public policy decisions by Trump aides both before and after he took office. The resulting investigative report made public Monday presents events surrounding the 2016 energy speech as a prime example of how Trump's close aides were granting their foreign business contacts access to campaign policy decisions. Yes, not surprising there. A source close to Barrack confirmed the basic details to ABC News, amazingly enough. A statement from Barrack's spokesman, first published by The Times, said prosecutors had confirmed to Barrack's attorneys that they have no further questions for Mr. Barrack. His aides told the New York Times he never worked on behalf of foreign states or entities, and he was ultimately disappointed that more of the language sought by his contacts in the Middle East did not wind up in Trump's speech, because he totally didn't work for them. Trump traveled to North Dakota in May of 2016, having just clinched the Republican nomination for president. He intended to give a policy speech that would solidify his position on oil, gas, and coal, an energy speech that would make clear that he would prioritize American energy jobs over grand multinational environmental pacts like the Paris Climate Agreement. Trump called his approach an America First energy plan that would make America wealthy again. Under my presidency, which voice should we pull up? Under my presidency. Oh, is this it here? I don't know whether this is the clip with the language in it. Could be the whole speech, though. Under my presidency, we will accomplish complete American energy independence, he told the crowd. Imagine a world in which our foes and the oil cartels can no longer use energy as a weapon. Imagine that. However, of course, the oil cartels were using energy as a weapon. They were using it as a weapon to leverage language that they preferred into your America First energy speech. But what's the point really at this point of, I'm going to use the word 3 times. What's the point at this point of pointing out how much leverage you give foreign governments in dictating what you do? Everyone knows it. What's the point of pointing out at this point more hypocrisy on your part, that your version of America First is, tell me what you want me to do that'll make you give me $1 billion. In the midst of the muscular, interesting choice of words, America First approach that became the hallmark of his campaign, the hallmark of his campaign was his muscularity. Everyone knows that his physique was important and all this muscular. I mean, I suppose you could get away with reporting Arnold Schwarzenegger's campaign for governor as muscular, but if there's any physical attribute that defines Trump, it's his doughy consistency, but muscular, because USA, America, Republicans. Falling prey to this again, even here, ABC News. But again, in the midst of the muscular America First approach that became the hallmark of his campaign, he added a phrase intended to placate an audience far away in the United Arab Emirates. Emirates. I like the way I pronounce that. Telling the crowd, again, in North Dakota, that he was lecturing on American energy independence, quote, "We will work with our Gulf allies to develop a positive energy relationship as part of our anti-terrorism strategy," which really means nothing. "We will continue to pay for oil from the Gulf. We'll buy it. We'll be giving tremendous amounts of money to the United Arab Emirates, and that will buy us a surface level cooperation with our anti-terrorism efforts, just the way our paying the Saudis has worked. All of the hijackers on 9/11 basically came from Saudi Arabia. They still fund Al-Qaeda, A-L-C-A-I-D-A, Al-Qaeda networks around the world, allegedly, and of course have been instrumental in exporting their particular brand of Islam around the world, which has apparently metastasized into somehow radical Islamic terrorism in some cases. from around the world, though the people who perpetrate it from around the world or who espouse it online from around the world seem to have picked it up for whatever reason at schools constructed and paid for by the Saudi regime, and where the instructors teach a very particular brand of Saudi-based Wahhabist extremist Muslim thought. So, hey, just kind of weird coincidence there. Oh, and also, by the way, they gave me all sorts of golden trinkets when I visited, and we danced with swords, and maybe they're making gigantic loans to my son-in-law. Okay, with which he's, by the way, putting to, just to connect all the stories together one more time, all the Middle Eastern oil kingpins who are loaning Jared Kushner. We might as well start calling him Jared Trump and see if that gets him angry or not. I'm not sure whether he would take that as a compliment. But giving Jared Kushner all that money so that he can shore up his family business of making inner cities, including Baltimore, Maryland, into urban hellholes that his father-in-law can attack when Elijah Cummings, whose district includes some of these places, but not all, and whose district also includes some fantastic and nationally renowned areas that have been revitalized tremendously by joint federal, state, and local projects, whatever. But they can attack him while he is busy revealing that this money is being funneled around as between this tightly knit circle of rich a-holes. Just thought I'd point that out along the way as well. The language that was actually included, the language was modest when compared to what was requested, interestingly enough, by officials in the oil-rich Emirates, so I guess somebody had the good sense to tone it down. According to the text messages exchanged between Barak and Rashid al-Malik, a former business associate in the UAE. Al-Malik had secretly worked as an intelligence asset for the UAE government. Surprise. That won't bother John Ratcliffe any, I'm sure. His task as an intelligence asset was to report to his Emirati intelligence handlers on topics of consequence to the UAE, a rather broad mandate, the House report said, citing an Intercept news report. Oh, from the Intercept folks. Not an intercepted, but a capital I, the Intercept. William F. Cofield, an attorney for al-Malik, I think I've heard his name before, told ABC News his client was never a conduit to the Trump Organization for anyone. He has never been a paid intelligence source for anyone. They may have paid him in not beheading. That is an excellent currency there in the Middle East. Mr. al-Malik is from the UAE and has a home in the U.S., because that's what people who are from the UAE do, I guess. He loves the UAE and the USA, said Cofield. He almost lost it there. He was a business associate of Mr. Barak's, and they shared a personal desire to build bridges between the citizens of both. It's really that simple. Like Jared Kushner just wants to build bridges. Barak and al-Malik began the text message exchanges 2 weeks before Trump's energy speech was set to be delivered, according to the House report. Barak sent a draft to the candidate's energy remarks to al-Malik, and a message that said, "What do you think of his energy message given to American executives with a pro-Middle East point of view? For you and Saeed to review," it says, but he means review, "for me quickly. I need a few pro-Middle East aspects." The report does not identify Saeed. I bet we can probably guess and who that might be. An hour later, al-Malik responded, "This is what I got from them," according to the report. The text does not identify them, but House investigators say they believe it is a reference to Saudi and Emirati officials. In that text, al-Malik requests that new language add references to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and UAE Crown Prince Abduhabi Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who we know as, that's MBZ as opposed to MBS from Saudi Arabia, as well as a line that states, quote, "We can and should support reform in the Middle East. in the process, thereby reducing the appeal of Islamic terrorism and support our allies who are fighting our enemies. It's a very tenuous connection, but that's the one that MBS and MBZ really wanted. Okay. The language that winds up in Trump's speech, ultimately, it's a funky way of expressing it, actually. And I skipped a paragraph here. We'll have to go back and do that. But the following day, Barrack proposes the additional language. You know, this is the sort of narrative telling that you can do informally, but I would have thought ABC News would have said the following day, Barrack proposed the additional language. But here's how they say. Barrack proposes the additional language to Manafort, suggesting references to the two Arab leaders and language that loosely mirrors the sentiments that had been requested. He adds in his email, this is probably as close as I can get without crossing a lot of lines. A lot of lines. He's aware of the lines. Well, there we go. That'll wrap up the case. Thanks for putting that last in the article. Anyway, the language that winds up in Trump's speech ultimately does not include the direct references to the Gulf leaders, that's wise, but does include a nod to the requested sentiment, expressing his desire to, quote, work with our Gulf allies to develop a positive energy relationship as part of our anti-terrorism strategy. It would have been, I guess they thought, even a bridge too far to actually mention MBZ and MBS in the speech. And how would that go over in North Dakota anyway? That was probably a decision made not so much to avoid, suspicion of espionage, but to avoid the political backlash of, how is... imagine you're giving a speech in North Dakota about America First energy independence, and you say, I'd like to thank our friends Mohammed bin Salman and Prince Abdulhamid Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for their help in the Gulf, and we're going to be working with them as closely as possible. People are there to hear him say, I'm going to bring coal jobs back to North Dakota, and we don't want any of that cancer-causing wind thing to happen. But thank you to great Americans and a good friend, Abdulhamid, imagine him trying to say this. I can't hardly even say it. Abdulhamid Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Really. So, all right. Well, good call on that one, I think, on behalf of their candidate there. In a related story, because all stories are related, I also have from ABC News, again, from Benjamin Siegel, again, and Matthew Mosk. I guess it's probably sourced from the same report, but they very intriguingly have split it into two stories here. Very wisely, I think. Now it made me feel like I was connecting two stories that were already connected, and but gave me a chance to move between articles rather than reject reading you one very long one because we wouldn't have time for it. Ready for this? I bet this is mine from the same. It has to be mine from the same report, but a different angle on the same activity, some of which you will recognize as a longtime listener to the show. A longtime Trump insider has been pushing a proposal to build dozens of nuclear power plants in Saudi Arabia, while seeking to avoid restrictions on the transfer of U.S. nuclear technology, and has at times stood to profit from the effort, according to an investigative report by, of course, the House Oversight Committee. No wonder he's so mad at Elijah Cummings. Today's report reveals new and extensive evidence that corroborates committee whistleblowers and exposes how corporate and foreign interests are using their unique access to advocate for the transfer of U.S. nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, said Elijah Cummings, the Maryland Democrat who chairs the committee. And these are the same players and part of the same process. It's interesting tactically to separate them, though I don't know whether it's better to simply say, no, these are two sides of the same coin and they ought to be presented together in the same article. Well, we'll give them both options. ABC News strategically, maybe not, went with the other option. Here on Kagro in the Morning, we're going with option one, put the two of them together by reading them back to back. We learn now that the report is 50 pages long, not mentioned in the previous story. The 50-page report, which relied on 60,000, this number we had heard, documents and statements from whistleblowers inside the administration, and that's linked. So I might want to read about who are the whistleblowers inside the administration at some point. It was made public Monday, that's yesterday. It focuses on the actions of Thomas Barrack, a wealthy Los Angeles businessman who oversaw President Donald Trump's inaugural committee, as well as other efforts by the retired Lieutenant General and notorious spy Michael Flynn to push a Saudi nuclear energy plan. Remember, America First energy plan. And in my big speech about America First energy was A, written by the UAE, B, wanted me to mention Mohammed bin Salman, and let's go through the entire name one more time. Prince Abdulhabi Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Just so that you know, America First, and also P.S., the flip side of our working with our Gulf partners. Imagine that one, right? We're going to work with our Gulf partners. How did they say it? To develop a positive energy relationship as part of our anti-terrorism strategy. Really? Tell me more about your partnership with Gulf allies and the positive energy relationship as that's supposed to be part of our anti-terrorism strategy. Well, it's funny you should ask that, because the plan is to try and circumvent United States national security laws in order to transfer nuclear technology to the Middle East as part of our anti-terrorism strategy. Well, no wonder that wouldn't have gone over big in North Dakota. My goodness, I wish he had given this speech. Well, it wouldn't have made any difference because, of course, they would have said, he tells it like it is. He says the things we're all thinking but are afraid to say. That phrase came up today, too. I was retweeting, actually, earlier this morning, the part of his Rose Garden remarks yesterday where he said, I was, I'm not going to say I was a first responder, but I was there at Ground Zero on 9/11. Right? Mr. He tells it like it is, but it actually wasn't that way. But the other phrase being, he says the things that are on our minds. He says the things that we all want to say, but we're afraid to say because of PC culture. That's the real problem. We all want to say these things. We all believe these things, but he's the only one with the courage to say it. Imagine if that were the case, right? Just apply that to if you are a Trump voter and you're listening to this, you're crazy, but imagine applying, he says the things we all are thinking but are afraid to say to that. I mean, obviously it doesn't have to apply to every single thing he says in order for you to mostly believe that's the case, but apply it to that one. Well, he's lying about having been at the 9/11 Ground Zero site. He's lying about having observed the heroic work. He's lying about, maybe kind of sort of being a first responder. He's lying about having sustained damage on 9/11 so that he could steal $150,000 in funding for the recovery. Imagine that it was really the case that you were thinking of saying that you too were at Ground Zero and were kind of sort of a first responder. And you were standing by that comment and indeed wished you had made it yourself. But he was the only one with enough courage to do it. That would be interesting. That would be very telling. That's why you are voting for crazy people, because you yourself are crazy. President Trump is, as upsetting as this is going to be to the mental health care community, Trump is sick in the head, and you got to realize that. And for him to get down there at this late date and say, I was sort of a first responder is indicative of illness. And you thinking that's him telling it like it is and that you wish you had said it is probably indicative of your illness as well. All right. Back to this story, though. Imagine saying he tells it like it is and he says the things we want to say but are afraid to say. And apparently that includes, out there in North Dakota, the energy independence place, the coal miners of Appalachia all wanted to say, they wished they had the courage to say, what we ought to be doing for our energy independence is buying more oil from the UAE so that they will lend money to slumlords. And while we're at it, we also ought to be fighting their involvement in in Middle Eastern terrorism by sending them nuclear technology. That's the way the deal ought to work. We'll buy oil from them, and then, to top it all off, we will send our nuclear technology to them that the federal government has forbidden us from this point from sending to them because of the danger of the proliferation of nuclear weapons, whether outright enriched uranium nuclear weapons or just dirty bombs that we've been worried about since forever. Nothing America wants more than to have fissile nuclear material spread throughout the Middle East in exchange for wads of cash. The only way it could be better is if the wads of cash were coming from us and going to them. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am being made aware of the latest in mass shooting news. This time, police responding to a shooting that left 2 people dead and 2 wounded, including police officers, outside of a Walmart, believe it or not, in Mississippi. Just catching up with that one. Let's see, South Haven, Mississippi, apparently the 3rd largest city in the state, and no other information to give you other than what's in this brief report. Stories of people who were just walking outside and heard pop, 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 and oh my gosh, it's a shooting, and I ran. Apparently, let's see, I've got one report that says actually one of the people hit was a police officer who was wearing a bulletproof vest and, quote, is doing fine. Did see some other reports which listed 2 dead and 2 wounded. That according to, let's see, the Capital Gazette reporting that 2 dead and 2 wounded, and a big pop-up ad that wants me not to read the rest of this thing. But in case you're interested, it's real estate for investors. Would much rather read about that than 2 dead and 2 wounded, including cop in shooting in Walmart in Mississippi. Suspect arrested. So we'll see what that one is all about. Gunman was shot by a South Haven police officer and hospitalized in unknown condition. Shot is his condition. Let's see. 2 people who died on Tuesday morning were Walmart employees. That does sound rather unfortunate. 1 person was found dead in the store, another found dead in the parking lot. And so, yeah, I'm not real sure whether there are another 2 wounded or not, or whether one of the 2 wounded was one of the police officers who, it turns out, I guess, is not wounded in the traditional gunshot sense, but is probably bruised up, despite the fact that he had a bulletproof vest on. So we'll see how that story develops in the coming days. Let's see. The shooting never stops. It's no surprise there. I need to return now to the story we were reading, the second of the 2 stories from Ben Siegel and Matthew Mosk, from generated by the House Oversight Committee's report on activities between Tom Barrack and his Middle Eastern contacts, this one including the notorious spy Mike Flynn, and the fantastic plan to supply nuclear materials to Saudi Arabia. So where were we? Yes, we were reading about Barrack and Flynn and their work to push a Saudi nuclear energy plan. Investigators say they found evidence that private parties with close ties to the president wielded outsized influence over U.S. policy toward Saudi Arabia. The report is embedded in here. You can read it for yourself in this article when I pass this on to you in the afternoon, thanks to Scott's help. Let's see. These new documents raise serious questions about whether the White House is willing to place the potential profits of the president's friends above the national security of the American people and the universal objective of preventing the spread of nuclear weapons, according to the report. The answer to that is yeah. They are absolutely willing to put potential profits for the president and his friends above anything. The investigative report was completed last week, but is being released on the heels of a barrage of critical tweets by President Trump targeting the Maryland Democrat and his Baltimore district. There is no indication Trump knew the report was imminent. Okay, so that's interesting. That's speculative, I'm sure, but there you have it. The word that ABC is going with is that he hated Elijah Cummings for all of the other work that Cummings has been doing to expose wrongdoing by the president and his inner circle, and began to attack him for that, and that Cummings followed that up by saying, well, there's more. I don't know whether it really makes a great deal of difference, but there's the story that they're going with. The White House did not cooperate with the investigation, providing none of the documents requested. Congressional investigators said documents they did recover showed that some Trump administration officials used personal email accounts to communicate with executives from private companies pushing the plan. This, of course, but her emails, yada, yada. And, of course, as we know, whenever this happens, they say this is obviously an attempt to evade oversight, legally required oversight of the White House and its activities. All of that is supposed to take place in official emails, which are archived and documented and reviewed at some point by somebody, or at least are available when investigators want to find out what happened. But instead they used personal email accounts to do this work, which is illegal and indicative of a huge effort to evade detection. How they got it, I don't know. And whether there's more out there is an open question. They've learned all of this without any cooperation from the White House whatsoever. We'll see whether they can, I don't know, use various lawsuits, some of which are finally pending, some of which are only continually threatened, to be able to leverage out some more information which has been hidden from them to this date. Although why there would be even more incriminating information inside official channels, I don't know. Unless the Trump administration has stood everything on its head and said the really super important stuff, the really super incriminating stuff ought to be done through official channels only, because we will be claiming legal leverage to prevent the release of those emails. The private ones, there's less opportunity for us to prevent from being released. There's the opportunity for outside forces to leak them because they're privately held and others have access to them, whereas official channels, we can always claim falsely that these are classified documents and refuse to turn them over. Well, I guess one day we'll find out whether they did that or whether they went the more traditional route of, if you're going to cover up stuff and do if you're going to do crimes, do them in the private email. That's the way people usually do things, but Trump does things upside down and backwards sometimes. All right, so the White House didn't cooperate with the investigation. They didn't provide any documents. Investigators say the documents they did recover showed that some Trump administration officials used personal email accounts in doing all this. In several instances, it was unclear if those officials, quote, took steps to preserve this email as required by the Presidential Records Act, the report said. That would be a no. White House, once again, declined to comment. Committee Republicans, in a report issued last week, pushed back on the Democrats' review. So if the report was issued last week by the Republicans, that still doesn't answer the question of whether or not President Trump was aware that the report was coming. It would have been a matter of public record. Republicans would have made the White House and other officials around him, around President Trump, aware that the report was coming because they put out their minority views on it last week. Whether or not that penetrated the skull of Donald J. Trump is a separate question. But the reporting earlier here that there's no indication that Trump knew the report was imminent, okay, sure. There was no indication given that the report was imminent except for the Republicans issuing their response to it last week. Duh. Anyway, in their stupid report, they pushed back on Democrats' reviews, saying the Trump administration did not act inappropriately in contemplating the potential transfer of nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. We knew they would eventually come around to that. Republicans also argued that Barak had no conflicts by promoting the nuclear proposal because he ultimately did not join the administration, you see. The investigation focuses on a company called IP3 International, which is run by a group of retired American generals, and their years-long effort to promote a plan to sell dozens of nuclear power plants to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. The company has been aided in its efforts by two well-known Trump advisors, Flynn and Barak, a California investment executive who has deep ties in the Middle East. We don't know how deep they really are, but we know he has this deep affection for money, and that's what he wanted to get out of this thing. The idea that he has no conflicts because he didn't join the administration is somewhat questionable, not the least of the reasons there being that he headed up maybe one of the biggest quasi-governmental heists going, the Trump Inaugural Committee, which has the air of a governmental function, though it is not one, and also provided a huge and unaccountable slush fund from which President Trump, the entire family, Barak himself, Barak, however he pronounces it, could have drawn an immense amount of money. All right. Just sort of fun, and thought that would be worth adding. Oh, by the way, Trump back at it, crapping on Baltimore for another 90 seconds or so, according to Aaron Rupar here. I guess I'll put this one aside and in pocket to share with you. Or maybe we can take a listen to it at some point if we've got 90 seconds towards the end of the show. But anyway, just to let you know, so this is now running for 4 days now that this continues. I wonder if it has anything to do with what we're reading here, because that's not getting generalized coverage as far as I can tell. Thank God we've got time to read it here. The report alleges that Flynn and later Barak helped push the proposal during the 2016 campaign in the White House and later during briefings with senior White House officials, including Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and ultimately President Trump. IP3 officials also briefed cabinet officials during including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Secretary of Energy Rick Perry, according to the report. Perry hasn't yet been forced from office by scandal, so we might as well add him to the list here. Barak promoted the effort as part of what he called a Middle East Marshall Plan. Because, yes, nothing the Middle East needs more, the impoverished Middle East needs more than a Marshall Plan to rebuild itself, while MBS and MBZ build fantasy cities of the future with flying taxis and robot martial arts combatants. Well, anyway, this was something Barak promoted despite concerns from some White House officials and lawmakers that Saudi Arabia's true goal was to obtain technology for nuclear weapons, which could heighten tensions in the unstable region. Ahead of the report's release, a spokesman for Barak spoke with the New York Times about allegations that the longtime Trump friend used his connections to assist foreign interests, telling the newspaper Barak had no incentive to lobby on behalf of any particular country or countries in the Persian Gulf because his business interests and policy concerns span the entire region. In other words, anyone can buy me off in the entire region, and so therefore I'm not conflicted. Sounds like the exact opposite. There is zero pay-to-play here, Barak's spokesman told the Times, and as you know, this is how you read a Trumpster comment, it's all pay-to-play. It's 100%. That's the opposite of zero. Anyway, Barak's spokesman added that there was no evidence that he or his company had profited from the interactions with the administration. A spokesperson for Barak told ABC News in a statement after the report was released, Tom Barak has been cooperating with the Committee on Oversight and Reform of the U.S. House of Representatives and has provided the documents the committee requested. We'll see whether that's true. Mr. Barak's engagement in investment and business development throughout the Middle East for the purpose of better aligned Middle East and U.S. objectives are well known, as are his more than 4 decades of respected relationships throughout the region. Mr. Barak's consistent attempts to bridge the divide of tolerance and understanding between these two great cultures is etched in the annals of time. Holy flowery language, Batman. Help me out. This is not political. It is essential. Mr. Barak has never had a position in the Trump administration except for running his inauguration. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, well, technically true, but in reality not true. And, wow. So, I mean, I guess you could align our interests through, I don't know, let's say political union like we're doing with the Russians. It's good to have a good relationship with Putin, right? And one of the ways you can have a good relationship with Putin is do whatever he wants. It'll be a great relationship from his point of view. And by the way, how does the alt-right feel about referring to Middle Eastern culture as one of the great cultures and providing, building a bridge of tolerance and understanding between the two great cultures and having that etched in the annals of time? Geez, self-important much? Anyway, the alt-right should have a field day with that one, except they won't care. Reached by phone Monday, retired Rear Admiral Michael Hewitt, the CEO of IP3, declined to comment on the report ahead of its release. That's good. Now he's out of the story. Well done. In a February statement responding to the committee's interim report, IP3 defended its efforts, arguing the group was working to empower the U.S. nuclear industry and counteract Russian and Chinese efforts to export nuclear technology in the Middle East and other regions. And that's maybe the only, connection to reality that this IP3 so far has ever had. I mean, that at bottom, the Russians and Chinese are very interested in exporting nuclear technology to those places. I guess they just don't care about the proliferation problem. But, so that doesn't mean that we too ought to not care about it. We ought to prevent the Chinese and Russians from doing it. But I guess absent that, they figured it's going there eventually. We might as well profit from it. We'll probably be dead before they develop their nuclear weapons anyway. So what the hell? Let's just die rich. Flynn's involvement in the effort came before and during the 2016 campaign and included emails to executives at IP3's predecessor in which he touted his access to the Russian ambassador and boasted of meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin at a December 2015 dinner in Moscow. Flynn served initially as Trump's national security advisor but was forced out and later pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI during the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign. And none of this even entered into that situation. Imagine making him your national security advisor. Wow. Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, called the report a smear campaign by Democrats. Special counsel investigated all of these matters. Not really. And General Flynn cooperated extensively, answering all their questions on all their Middle East issues and everything else, Powell told ABC News in an email Monday. It would be wonderful for the country if Mr. Cummings could do something constructive for the country for a change. Oh, another attacker. Great. More recent efforts to lobby the Trump White House on the Saudi nuclear plan appeared to be spearheaded in part by Barak, the report said. A billionaire financier and chairman of Trump's inaugural committee, Barak worked on several fronts to push the plan. Pardon me, boy. Hoped to get that microphone muted for that one, but it just wasn't cooperating. The report alleged that he and other proponents would have had the potential to reap sizable financial rewards if the deal went forward. Barak, the report said, was negotiating directly with President Trump and other White House officials to seek powerful positions within the Trump administration, including special envoy to the Middle East and ambassador to the UAE. At the same time, he was promoting the interests of U.S. corporations seeking to profit from the transfer of nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. So just for the record, well, he didn't have conflicts because he wasn't a part of the administration. But he was seeking to become a part of the administration. Yeah, well, he didn't. He was also taking steps for his own company, Colony North Star, to profit from the same proposals he was advancing, according to the report. There's your conflict. That included an effort to acquire a leading American nuclear company that would have played a key role in the project. New documents obtained by the committee reveal how Flynn, who was waiting to be sentenced for lying to the FBI, and remember that the judge in that case at one point asked, how is it that you're not charged with treason? Let's just say the word again. Anyway, he's awaiting sentencing for lying to the FBI and was caught secretly working for Turkish interests during the campaign. Also advocated for the proposal before and during his stint as Trump campaign advisor and later in the White House. As national security advisor, he was advocating this. The project was on his agenda on his now infamous 2015 trip to Moscow, when he attended a gala for Russian media outlet RT and sat with Vladimir Putin before joining Trump's campaign team. Ahead of that trip to Russia, Flynn emailed business associates saying he would, quote, relay any messages to specific people, unquote, about the proposal to transfer nuclear technology to the Middle East. Well, no wonder the Russians and Chinese are trying to sell nuclear technology to the Middle East. Flynn went to Russia in 2015 and blabbed to Vladimir Putin that he was doing this. And then lo and behold, Russian oligarchs decided, maybe we'll murder all those people and do it ourselves. I skipped the murder part. That's too bad. In June of 2016, as he was advising Trump's campaign, Flynn was emailing Rear Admiral, and he was a real admiral as well, Michael Hewitt, co-founder and CEO of IP3, which they already told us in this article, about trying to find time to meet with then Saudi Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Washington later that month. Maybe we get a call in today, he said to Hewitt, according to an email cited in the report. Aware of MBS visit, Hewitt replied, getting support from the Hill to get on his calendar. After Trump's win in the election, which it wasn't one, Hewitt and other boosters of the project began aggressively working to secure support for the plan. IP3 officials traveled to Saudi Arabia in December of 2016 to solicit $120 million in funding for the project and conveyed strong, unequivocal support for this program from the Trump administration. Retired General Keith Alexander wrote in an email cited in the report. There are his generals for you. Flynn's role in the Trump administration was instrumental to their pitch. Ahead of the inauguration, Robert Bud McFarlane, remember him? A proponent of the nuclear proposal, amazingly enough, said in an email to Flynn that his support for the Marshall Plan had a palpable impact on the tone and substance of all our meetings in Saudi Arabia, according to an email cited in the report. Of course, every time they sat down, they said, one of our guys is going to be Trump's national security advisor, so we're going to get this approved. This is going to work, finally. You're worried that the deep state, the actual responsible officials inside the United States intelligence community are going to block this because they're worried about nuclear proliferation? Well, for one thing, we're going to replace all of them with yes men. And for another, people who stand to profit enormously from this, who are in fact on our board, are going to be in position as national security advisor and maybe later as director of national intelligence and head of the CIA as well. So if anybody objects to sending nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, we can always have the CIA and the ODNI issue reports that say there's zero danger of this. And in fact, it's strengthening our fight against terrorism. And then, one day the bomb will go off. And at that point, we're all screwed. So who cares, right? Back to the story. In case you don't remember Bud McFarlane, he's 81. And of course, as in his past, resigned as President Ronald Reagan's national security advisor during the Iran-Contra scandal, and later pleaded guilty in 1988 to charges involving the withholding of information from Congress. So he makes a great partner in all this, and has since been a global consultant in the security and energy sectors in recent years. And Isn't it fun when the energy and security sectors overlap in the form of fissile nuclear materials being sent to the Middle East? As Flynn continued to consult for the project in 2017, Barrack, a prominent Trump supporter with long-standing business ties to the Middle East, worked to secure a prime place of influence inside the White House. While he was in talks with Trump about a role as special envoy to the Middle East or ambassador to the UAE, Barrack was communicating with advocates for the Saudi nuclear plan, including then National Security Council Deputy Director K.T. McFarland and Bud McFarlane, to differentiate between the two of them, according to the report. So, interesting. Barrack met with Trump at the White House about the Middle East Marshall Plan on the same day the president met with Saudi Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House. Correspondence between Barrack's secretary and the White House, cited in a report, shows. Barrack told a business associate he briefed Trump before and after his meeting with the Saudi Deputy Crown Prince and helped facilitate the prince's visit, according to text messages cited in the report. Is that the visit to the United States that the State Department wasn't alerted to ahead of time in violation of all existing diplomatic protocol? They may have been, right? Those text messages also indicate that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, you know about him, participated in a call with Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and leader of the UAE, who is closely aligned with Saudi Arabia. Barrack later emailed Kushner about his potential role in the administration. Oh, I guess Barrack's potential role. After thinking through our discussion this week, it might be an interesting idea to have the special envoy position hold responsibility for implementing the economic agenda and related action items that will arise out of your Saudi-sponsored summit, he wrote, according to the report. Your Saudi-sponsored summit? Which one was that? Interesting, though. I'm losing sight of what is actually being said here. Oh, I think it might be an interesting idea to have the position that you're thinking of giving to me be responsible for, let's say, implementing this plan, which would be tremendously profitable personally to me. What conflicts? He couldn't possibly have conflicts. Barrack texted a business associate in the UAE that he had floated the idea, which he said would be, quote, to make me a special envoy to the Middle East to help them with Saudi, UAE, and Gulf USA cooperation. In the days following Trump's meeting with the Saudi Deputy Crown Prince, IP3 leaders engaged with senior Trump administration officials to promote the nuclear proposal, including former Defense Secretary James Mattis, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, throw him out, and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Finally, throw him out too, please. In a March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2017 letter to the Saudi leader, the IP3 officials said the agreements between the president and the Saudi ruler established the framework for our unique opportunity to take the next steps with IP3 and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The letter also referenced a partnership to acquire Westinghouse Electric, a U.S.-based company that manufactures nuclear reactors and nuclear warheads. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Soon after, Barrack began corresponding with top officials at IP3 about a plan to bid for Westinghouse in what Democrats believe to be the Saudi Public Investment Fund, a sovereign wealth fund. How do you think that would have gone over with regulators in a normal administration? The Saudis want to buy the chief American manufacturer of nuclear reactors and nuclear warheads. Well, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm sure they'll let that happen. Unless, of course, for totally corrupt reasons, you chose to overrule them or didn't have to overrule them because you installed idiot yes men who know nothing about national security in the positions granted the authority by law and the Constitution to approve such sales. In a memo, just to finish up here before we have to cut out because we're out of time, once again, we'll just have to leave it there. In a memo to Steven Schwartzman, does everyone remember that name? CEO of Blackstone, one of the private equity firms he contacted about potentially bidding, Barrack said Saudi Arabia and the UAE have committed to invest in the Westinghouse acquisition and are willing to concurrently lock in Westinghouse as their primary partner on the 30-plus reactors expected to be constructed in the coming decade. Blackstone declined to partner with Colony, that of course being Barrick's fund. We skipped over one paragraph in which they initially said, yeah, they were going to build 30 reactors, but there's the reference to it, the second reference. While that bid for Westinghouse was unsuccessful, Barrick in January of 2018 began corresponding with a top official at Brookfield Asset Management, the firm that acquired Westinghouse, according to emails cited in the report, offering his assistance. More than a month later, an employee at Barrick's firm, Colony North Star, sent a slide presentation to another associate suggesting it had been invited to contribute $50 million to Brookfield's bid for Westinghouse. The article goes on at some length. We're not going to be able to finish it all. It's time to hand things over to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to finish this up, but you know how these things go. I gave you all I could in the 2 hours. Coming up next, though, Fox anchor Shep Smith was not having any of the Moscow Mitch McConnell's whining about modern-day McCarthyism. That seems to be backfiring against him. Let's see. He'll be talking about the America First speech as well, and maybe he can spend some time getting into what we didn't at the end of this article. Much, much more, of course. I'll try and squeeze a little bit more after
From
this.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, lots of plans to continue to follow up on this story, so that's good news. We don't actually have to leave it there. And other stuff he's got on tap, we'll see whether he gets to it. Capital One says what information you and over 100 million other individuals in the U.S. and Canada may have had in your wallet has been hacked. We'll get to that and much more after this. See you tomorrow.